Hello, everybody. Welcome to 321 NoKiddin. Bobby the Awesome here. And today I have with me Anita Kuhnley. Welcome, Anita.
Thank you so much, Bobby. I really appreciate that. I'm excited to be here with you today and to connect with your listeners as well.
Yeah, it's good to have you here. You have kind of a neat approach on somebody, at least anybody my age or older knows about. So I can't wait to dive into that. And it also sounds like you have some exciting information to share from your own strategy. But let's get my audience a chance to get to know you. So tell us a little about yourself.
Yeah, thanks for that kind introduction. I appreciate that. My background is in clinical mental health counseling. So I work at one of the largest nonprofit universities in the U.S., training counselors and psychologists. And so I've also worked at Teen Challenge, addictions recovery facility for adolescent boys in particular, and as a college counselor. And right now I'm teaching full time. And I love writing and making psychological concepts and principles easier to understand and more applicable to daily life. And my most recent book is called The Mr. Rogers Effect, 7 Secrets to Bring Out the Best in Yourself and Others from America's Beloved Neighbor. And I'm working on another book right now that's going to be released, I think, a little bit later this year. I'm not sure the exact release date yet, with Baker Books. So that's coming soon.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
The Mr. Rogers book. So you talked about teaching, and thank you for that, because we need a lot of people in the field and we need a lot more resources than I think are available nowadays. So thank you for helping with that community. But who's your audience? Like, who did you write that book to serve?
Well, originally I was thinking of my students because the inspiration originated out of one of my counseling classes. I used to teach intensives before COVID, where online students from all across the US and even across the world, we had some international students, would come to campus for a week from 8 to 5 and be in class. And these are students that are training to be school counselors or clinical mental health counselors. I also work with students that are in a PsyD program studying to be psychologists, but we were having a discussion on helping people process their emotions, painful emotions, and staying present with them through that, not trying to fix it or band-aid it, but just staying with them, allowing them that safe space to talk. And showed them a video clip of Mr. Rogers talking with Senator Pastore the day he was credited with saving public television, earning $20 million in less than 7 minutes, and sharing with Senator Pastore the lyrics to a song he wrote. And it was amazing, the transformation. Like, he transformed that senator from an adversary to an ally in minutes. And at the end, Senator Pastore, who was a self-proclaimed pretty tough guy, was saying, I think it's wonderful. I got chill bumps, and you just earned the $20 million. And throughout that discussion, talk with Pastore about managing anger. And I asked my students that were in the classroom, I said, hey, what was it like for you guys to hear this? And one student said, I work in inner city schools and my kids don't have anybody. They don't have a Mr. Rogers, so they turn to violence. And, that really bothered me, Bobby. I kept thinking about that. Everybody, even though Mr. Rogers is gone, everyone needs someone safe, a safe space to be able to share their feelings and get support. And I kept thinking and praying about that. And the idea came to explore, how Mr. Rogers created such a space so effectively, even on television, that 20 years later, we have movies like the Tom Hanks movie, Tom Hanks starring Mr. Rogers, being made about him. And so that was the inspiration behind the book, to kind of unpack how he did what he did so that we can all be the Mr. Rogers, so to speak, in our own neighborhood. So originally I had my students in mind. That is people that are training to help others in the field of mental health. But also, I think anybody who's in a helping profession, teachers, counselors, even parents, grandparents, entrepreneurs, people that want to connect with other people. So basically in people related, people oriented professions.
Love it. And thank you for explaining the context of it. You used a couple words that I'm just starting to get familiar with, not even, the last decade, maybe the last 5 or 6 years through my recovery journey, like being present, processing feelings. And in my mind, it's almost like they didn't exist before I discovered them. But, like we didn't, and I know it's like that, what's that reticular activating system or whatever. Like I didn't ever hear about people talking about being present, but I probably wasn't tuned into people talking about being present or processing feelings and emotions. So is there any way you can elaborate on that a little for the people who aren't in the profession maybe, and talk about the value of that, why you're even teaching that?
Yes. Yeah. So, it's interesting that you say that, because it really is that way, right? And I've heard people say the same thing, like when they are shopping for a new car and maybe they're looking at Volkswagens, all of a sudden they see them everywhere, and they didn't really notice them before. They're sure they were still there, but now they're on the radar. But as far as things like processing emotions and being present, Mr. Rogers, people thought of him as just a mild-mannered children's television therapist, but he was actually trained by some of the greats in developmental psychology. And so he had a way of explaining this that made it really easy. And it was this idea that feelings are mentionable and manageable. And it came from his mentor, Dr. Margaret McFarland. She said, anything that's human is mentionable. And when we mention it, we can make it more manageable. So he shortened it to just feelings are mentionable and manageable. And what he believed was that if we could teach kids how to manage painful emotions, and I would extend that to say even the child and all of us, right, our inner child, to manage those painful emotions, then we could create a safer place for tomorrow's children. And so he believed that and that's really the essence of emotional intelligence, right? Identifying our emotions and then being present with them, being willing to feel them, put a name to them, express them in words, and find an outlet to express them that doesn't hurt us and doesn't hurt anyone else.
You just put the whole premise in a very nice few sentences. And it's what I've come to believe about recovery. Is I had always gone, I didn't think of it when it was happening, but trying to now understand that I was never processing feelings. That's what the alcohol and the gambling was for. I didn't have to process feelings. And it's enlightening to have to do that. But I also would say, well, a couple of things, at least from my experience, and you can comment on this any way you want. One is, I don't know I'm still learning how to identify feelings that are not obvious, right? Like, happy, sad, the basics, but is it anxiety? Is it not fear, but apprehension? Is it, those, like if there was layered emotions, the ones that are a little bit deeper. And I've also come to believe, and my 12 steppers might not, they know I love 12 step, but I also am starting to believe that I don't want to say addiction is curable, but if you heal the feelings or the emotions and process them, you then don't need to escape. So you then don't need addiction. So you almost don't need the bet or the alcohol because you've done the work. So they don't become as triggering versus that theory of don't go near, a liquor store. Don't go in a casino. Like, I'm not bothered to go in a casino today because I've done some of this work. And I'm not saying that it's a good idea for me to risk it, but I think all the stuff you're talking about translates that way. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think of that 12-step acronym that's used a lot: HALT, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. I think it was in a journal, Yale Journal of Biology of Medicine. It came out and they talked about how that's an example of poor self-care, right? If we, our blood sugar drops and we get too hungry, or we're angry or frustrated, dysregulated about something, lonely or tired, a lot of times addictions, like you mentioned, they can be numbing, so we don't have to deal with feelings, or they can be a way to change our state. To if we're, anxious, then, a lot of people talk about, how things like alcohol or marijuana helps them relax, or things like stimulants or caffeine helps them get revved up if they're feeling tired. And so I had in my training, my professor in my addictions course, he always said that everybody struggles with addiction, whether it's addiction to people pleasing or coffee or chocolate, or, we all have our things that we struggle with. And, my training was at a Christian university. So one of the thoughts behind that was this idea that, anything can become an idol if it becomes sort of the God in your life, or something that you're focusing on, or putting before your relationship, or seeking God. And so, this idea of making feelings mentionable and manageable, it does have that sort of assumption that we can identify the feelings and know what they are, which is not always so easy, especially if we're numbing ourselves. And, not only that, but sometimes we're socialized not to feel, right? Like some people have grown up with these messages that indicate maybe some listening have heard some of these too, but turn that frown upside down, or don't complain, or I'll give you something to complain about. Not very empathic, right? But there's this hidden message, or maybe not so hidden, but there's the message that, it's not okay to feel. It's not okay to communicate those feelings. Just, put a smile on your face. And so then, this could be a challenge for counselors or 12-step recovery, or, then people come in to a safe space and they're encouraged to think and to feel and to share their struggles, and have been conditioned not to. So it can be really tough to shift into this new way of being present with our own emotions. And I really appreciate self-compassion, mindfulness exercises, because they allow that opportunity to remind ourselves that suffering is part of the human condition, and you're not alone in your pain, that other people suffer as well.
Yes, I agree with we all have something, and the compassion, it's the hardest to do for ourselves. It's so much easier. We can give it to our best friend or a stranger, but to give ourselves that own love and compassion is definitely a challenge. I'm going to shift gears for a minute, because I know that you prepared, is strategies the right word, or information? And I want to give you an opportunity to speak to what you've put together to share with the audience. Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah. So we talked about the 3 lessons learned from Mr. Rogers to promote success in recovery.
Yes. And we have that 10-second thing too. So I want to hear it all. I just don't want to lose track of any of it.
Right. Well, the first thing that comes to mind when I think about, what would Mr. Rogers have to teach us about being successful in recovery, is secret number 5, which is a secret of empathy. And then the Mr. Rogers effect, it came out of this research from psychiatrists, school counselors, psychologists, counselors, a panel of experts analyzing his work and his writings and trying to identify, how did he do it? How did he have such a strong connection with people? And, some people like to say that the opposite of addiction is connection. And I even heard on your podcast recently, you talked about couples and couples that are going through recovery together, and, asking different questions like, where is there a lack of connection in your relationship? So it sounds like this is something that you've talked about before on the podcast too.
Well, and I have to give Paul credit, he's the host of Recovery Elevator, which inspired me to start 321 from the gambling lens. His is alcohol focused. And I think that's the first place I picked it up. And I just came off of one of his retreats a couple weeks ago. So he's always saying the connection piece is the opposite of addiction. And it just, once you grasp that, I think that's actually another tool to help, at least for me, lower my guard and be like, okay, I need to, like, I'm living in a new area. So I started going to GA meetings here just to make connection and feel grounded, right? My employees aren't going to know necessarily what it urge for gambling or keeping it on the forefront. So just kind of keeping myself safe through connection is even applicable now.
That makes a lot of sense. Having a safe place where other people can relate and connect and share. There's that feeling of being understood. And, when we think about connection, Mr. Rogers was on television, and I think of him as like the king of connection and emotional intelligence, because he was able, long before we had Zoom, to connect with kids. I read a story about a little boy who was 3 or 4 who said, "Mommy, I think this man knows my name." And he was just watching the show, but he felt so connected and known and understood. And I think part of it is because he had this authenticity. So, and there's something I wanted to share with you. When Mr. Rogers was a kid, he was bullied for his outer appearance, and he was chased down the street, and kids called him names. And he took refuge at a neighbor's house. And one of the things that happened is he talked to some adults in his life about being bullied, and they said, well, just don't let on that it bothers you, and then they'll stop. But that didn't seem like a solution for him. Meanwhile, his grandpa, he had a special relationship with his grandpa McFeely, and such a strong connection with his grandpa.
McFeely, is that what you said? There's some irony into that.
Yeah. Well, isn't that funny? His speedy delivery man was named Mr. McFeely, and he was named after his grandpa, whose name was Fred McFeely. Nice. But his grandpa used to tell him, "Freddie, you've made this day a special day just by your being you. There's no one else in the whole world like you, and I like you just the way you are." And then he internalized that message, and he took that and he shared that on nearly 800 episodes, over 800 episodes all across the US and Canada for the duration of his career with children all over. And so I think he took that sense of connection that he had with his grandfather and that sense of being known and loved and cared for. And he wanted everyone to be able to feel that. And so anytime he got a chance to speak, whether he was at like an award ceremony for television, receiving an award, or speaking at a graduation or somewhere else, he did this exercise I like to call a 10-second transformation. That's really the Mr. Rogers effect in action, because it has the capacity to really, change your state of mind. And I think, from what we talked about with HALT and different addictions, they often can change our state, right? Whether it's a dopamine boost or serotonin boost or something that's going on neurochemically. But this is something without anything but positive side effects that can do the same thing. So if you feel comfortable, I'd love to do this 10-second technique with you.
Let's go.
All right.
I love this stuff.
We'll roll up our sleeves and do that. All right. So if you would, I'll just adapt it for our situation, right? Bobby, you have been in this process, in this journey of recovery. And not only that, but you have reached out to help others that are walking through this journey. You've started 2 different podcasts. You are making a difference and helping people all over that are listening. And listeners today, they may be entrepreneurs, they may be in recovery. They are going through this journey, and they are doing the work to become better every day. And chances are that all the success that you've had, you didn't get here on your own. There were people along your journey of recovery, along your journey of entrepreneurship and podcast creation, that kind of loved you into being who you are today. And so I would like to invite you to take just 10 seconds to think about those people that loved you into being who you are today. I'll keep the time. And I imagine how happy those people would be to know that in this moment, you thought of them, that they made a difference in your journey. And Mr. Rogers believed it was this energy, this love and kindness that we'd experienced that we need to bring forth into our work, and that brings out the best in who we are. And Bobby, I'd love to ask if you feel comfortable sharing who came to mind for you.
Well, my mother and Paul right away. My girlfriend, Karen, my counselor in the community at the gambling center, especially when I got out, the recovery elevator community, and Paul, he was my first guest. My ex, who I met in rehab, was definitely a huge part of it. He's the one who taught me the V word, the vulnerability junk. Once he helped crack my code, it became easier. Those were all the ones that popped up first.
Well, I'm sure they would be excited to know that they played a role in the success that you're having today. I know for me, I always think of my memes. I keep a picture of her close by. She was 91 years young when she went home to be with the Lord, but she was just a very loving, encouraging person, that kind of person that always believed in you. I can imagine if she met you, she would say, "Wow, Bobby, you are really something else. You have overcome so much, and now you're helping so many people. That is really amazing." And she just really could see the best in people and really appreciate their gifts, and it was very enthusiastic and positive. And Bobby, I wonder, what was it like for you to just take this moment and think about those people that have loved you into being?
I will tell you, I liked thinking about the other people much better than I liked receiving the positive feedback you were giving to me. Which hopefully that doesn't mess up the experiment, but that made me a little uncomfortable as I'm trying to pay attention to my emotions. I'm like, and you, by the way, have that nice, very Mr. Rogers demeanor, like how you speak, and you're like drawing me in with this curiosity because you're so like docile and I'm so like high strung. So I'm really enjoying that, by the way. And I totally didn't mean to sidetrack, but I just had to let you know that was interesting as far as feeling.
Oh, that's important awareness. Yeah. So there was a little bit of discomfort with the positive feedback.
Yeah, there was.
Huh.
There was. But when thinking about all the people, I liked acknowledging, I know it was not an alone journey. And I know there's, oh God, 1,000 people more than I even got to mention in 10 seconds. And I think I went back to the more recent past than even the whole journey, because as we're unfolding this conversation, I'm thinking about not just who helped with the podcast or my recovery per se, but every single person that's been part of my life played an important role, whether it was what we might call good or bad, or the situation being good or bad. It all had its purpose. So there was the lessons and all of that. That's the frame of mind I look at things. So if I had 60 seconds, I probably would have encapsulated more of everybody. But the heavy hitters and the more recent ones, hopefully they know. Like, I'd like to think I do a pretty good job at letting them know that I'm grateful for them. And I don't know that I've ever framed it like you did. Like, I couldn't be here. I couldn't be doing the shows. Like, I don't know that I ever framed it that way. So that's going to be a takeaway for me to follow up on after this.
Oh, well, thanks for sharing that. And I definitely can't take credit. I think it's, Mr. Rogers, that's exactly the way he framed it. I just sort of adapted it to the setting. But, I think there's a couple different things that happen when we do this exercise, right? Like, it activates gratitude, for example, which is another one of the secrets. When we talk about the 3 lessons learned from Mr. Rogers, I'll tell you about some of the interesting benefits that come with that. But it activates that sense of gratitude. it also helps us feel more connected, because we realize that we are connected to those that have loved us into being, whether they're, and one thing I forgot to mention is that Mr. Rogers would often say, those people that have loved us into being, they may be nearby, they may even be in this room, they may be far away, or they may even be in heaven. But there are those people that have loved us into being. And so it can even remind us of, people that loved ones that we've lost, but that played such an important role. And so we've got the sense of connection that's activated there. The sense of empathy, knowing that someone is acknowledging our accomplishments and that we have been supported along the way, the gratitude, and the idea of our feelings, the way that we feel, those that we feel that appreciation for, we feel that maybe debt of gratitude towards being activated all together throughout this exercise. So all those things sort of interweave this, sort of a golden strand of connection and empathy and gratitude, and that can lead to a shift in our state of mind and our emotions that can lift us up a little bit and kind of give us a bump, or as I've heard you like to say, fill our bucket a little bit.
So how would this apply? So let's say a listener is out there and they want to perform this exercise. Is there cues in the book, or how would someone listening do this for themselves? Is it like almost like meditating for 10 seconds and thinking about who helped them become? Like,
Yes.
what would that look like?
There's cues in the book, and they could definitely read through that. But I recommend taking time to meditate on it, think about it, even write it down. But it's really just first acknowledging that you are at the point where you are in your life. And although we may not always be exactly where we want to be, we have to acknowledge how far we've come, that there are things that we've overcome. The fact that, some of us are facing extreme challenges, and that we're still here, we're still going, we're still facing those challenges day by day and getting up and keeping on, so to speak, right? So wherever you are on that spectrum of becoming, so to speak, giving yourself credit for having accomplished what you have, and then also acknowledging and sort of giving credit to other people that have played a role in that journey, and whether that support has been optimal or leaves something to be desired, there still are people that have helped us along our journey of becoming who we are today, and acknowledging that they could be close by, they could be far away, they could even be in heaven, but there are people somewhere along our journey that have helped us, and thinking about who they are, and then taking about 10 seconds to just think about those people. And you can expound on that if you'd like. Like for me, I like to always keep a picture of memes on my desk, and just to remind me of that, and that's just one of those triggers, that positive triggers, right? That reminds me of the sense of that I was so blessed. Well, it hurt so badly when she died. Not for her. She said she was ready to go. She had a strong relationship with the Lord. She was ready to go to heaven, as her, faith, a strong part of her life. But it was for those of us who were going to miss her when she was gone, that it was really hard for. So just a reminder, that she was there. And so, but taking that 10 seconds is that next step to really think about those individuals that have loved us into being who we are. And then also taking a moment to think about what it might be like for them to know that they have loved us into being, that that moment of empathy, of thinking about the happiness or the gratitude that they may feel to know that they were a part of that journey. And that can lead to a sense of connection with them, to know that perhaps maybe they're proud of the person that we've become, or maybe they are thankful to know that they played a role. And so that's sort of the progression of steps, as Mr. Rogers usually implemented it. Again, I've adjusted it for different settings and like to use it. And I encourage everybody to take a chance to do it. Mr. Rogers often said that what's way more important than the text that you read in the book is the white space, the margin on the page, because it gives you that time to really reflect and think about what you've experienced. And so that's what gives it meaning. It's not the exercise, but us talking through it, and Bobby, hearing your thoughts and what it was like for you. That's what gives it meaning, because without people taking time to reflect and participate, just reading the words doesn't make much of a difference unless we apply it,
Well, I appreciate you using me as an example. And I think what I heard was you're a proponent for us expressing to the people that we do have the ability to express the gratitude and acknowledging them out loud. Is that part of the process?
Yes, actually, that is a great segue. I appreciate you saying that about gratitude, because secret 4 is of the 7 secrets of the Mr. Rogers effect is gratitude, and gratitude has this ripple effect that can actually help us seek to overcome addictions. Now, this seems really unlikely, right? Like we've heard this old adage, count your blessings. Well, what does that have to do with our struggle with addictions? So, as we talked about before, I think one thing to keep in mind is whether, we have an addiction to coffee or caffeine or chocolate or gambling or drugs or pornography or alcohol, whatever it may be, all these things can do something to change or modify our physiological state. So whether it's, something that has a depressant effect like alcohol, or marijuana that may help with relaxation, or something that's a stimulant, they all change our state. But interestingly, gratitude might be this unlikely sort of medication that can change our state with these only positive side effects. So let's consider some of the benefits. And there's a long list of the benefits on page 104 and 105 of the text, but just to name a few of them, there's actually decreased risk of substance abuse disorders, decreased levels of depression, and increased social connection are all correlated with expressions of gratitude. And even Martin Seligman, the father of positive psychology, has conceptualized gratitude as a signature strength, as a strength. And if people utilize gratitude, express gratitude, they're more likely to experience that authentic happiness.
I really want this show to be the Anita show, but is it okay that I share a story about something that happened last night?
Oh, yes, please do.
Okay. So I don't know, it's been a while ago. I was at a recovery conference and I bought a shirt that says, I'm grateful. And on the back, it says 1 day at a time. It's just a black shirt. And gosh, it's gotten so old that I actually created some myself to sell because I couldn't find any on the internet to replace them. But anyway, I get a lot of compliments on it. So I've been door dashing lately to take some guilt off of spending money on myself. And I was out door dashing last night. And the first order I got was like this amazing, it was like I picked up 2 orders in the same place and they were both in a mile away. And, it was like DoorDasher gold. But last weekend, I had done the same kind of thing, picked up 2 orders. And one of the orders was Outback Steakhouse. And for the whole order to get paid was $2. There was no tip. It was just $2. And it definitely was not worth the time. But I had this conversation in my head at the time. I'm like, Bobby, doesn't matter. Be grateful for the order and blah, blah, blah. Like I was consciously doing the work to shift the pissy pants to grateful, because I was in pissy pants mode, full disclosure. So last night I get this first order and then it's quiet. So then I run in this tanning salon. I was like, okay, well, I'll just pause orders and I'll go and I'll do my tanning. And I'm so excited about this first order and I'm wearing my I'm grateful shirt and I walk in. And this young girl, they're welcoming me. And I was like, can I have a booth that's kind of quiet so I could do my meditation? And she's like, you're kind of spiritual, aren't you? And I said, well, actually, now that I'm in recovery, I am. I said, I couldn't even say the G word before. But what was really beautiful was this grateful shirt really like set the stage. I met a guy at the gas station who had 2 years sober. This young girl, 26 years old, she's going to be on 321 down the road, tells me about her 9 month sobriety in front of two of her coworkers, which I thought was beautiful and brave. So going back to the connection, this one shirt and the gratitude, like instead of having pissy pants all the time, like, because that's what I said to him. I said, I got rewarded, because I did gratitude last week with the bad order, and now I'm getting this great order. Not that it's for reward, but when we're mindful of that, the good stuff came, and it felt like a high walking out of that suntan place, having this engagement with these girls. And just how excited she was, like that I asked her to be on the show and that she could share her story. So gratitude does work, I guess, is the moral of the story.
Yes, I love that. So it's interesting how all of the sequence of events happened and those connections as a function of you wearing that shirt, but then also the awareness of, okay, I'm feeling a little bit crabby about this. I need to shift gears and get back to this grateful state. And then it sounds like you also had that paradigm shift in your perspective where you were looking for things to be grateful for, and you found them, and found more blessings with your next DoorDash jobs, with it sounds like better tips, better locations and things like that.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not like it's the end of the world, whether it's $2 or $5, right? But there is a mindset component. And since I really try to work on that all the time, almost to a fault, where I think I create my own blind spots, but the gratitude thing, the gratitude shirt works no matter when I wear it. I always get compliments, and it's not because it's a Gucci suit, or I don't even know if Gucci makes suits, whatever. I don't know name brands or anything, but it's not about that. Right? It's not name brands. It's not any of that. It's about the message. So people are starting to wake up to it, I think.
Yeah. I was thinking about the same thing the other day because you mentioned being a spiritual person. And I often share this passage with my students from Philippians because sometimes students get test anxiety. And there's this scripture in the book of Philippians, chapter 4, that talks about how to be anxious for nothing, but in prayer and supplication with thanksgiving to make our requests known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard our hearts and our minds in Christ Jesus. And it's interesting because in Proverbs, it talks about like guarding your heart. And I remember, when I was a lot younger and I first read that, and I was wondering, how do you guard your heart? What does that look like? Is that, you meet people that are more guarded and maybe less vulnerable, and so trying to figure that out. But then when you see in Philippians, it's like this message that explains how you do it. It's not about being guarded, but it's about actually being vulnerable and sharing those prayer requests, confessing those to God, and being thankful for the blessings that we have. And we see all these messages that's his will. And then now the science is catching up, right? Like all these peer-reviewed studies about the benefits of gratitude. Like we talked about a few, but there's more benefits, like lower blood pressure, enhanced immune function, increased life satisfaction, decreased risk of anxiety, quicker recovery from illness, increased resilience, increased happiness. And there's still more on that list, right? But those are some, science is catching up, to what we've long known to be true, that gratitude can really help us to be healthier and happier and more connected.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I love gratitude. So Anita, is there anything that I forgot to ask about or that we want to dive deep into before we have to go tonight?
I think that we've covered the 3 lessons from Mr. Rogers to promote success in recovery. We talked about empathy and how empathy is this idea of feeling with and connecting with people, and how addiction is the opposite of connection, and different strategies that Mr. Rogers used to promote connection, like the 10-second transformation. We talked about how feelings are mentionable and manageable, and this HALT acronym, and kind of bolstering our emotional intelligence. And then we talked about gratitude. So I think those were 3 of the keys. And I'd love to hear people's thoughts on the Mr. Rogers effect. It's available on audiobook, and also if you like to listen, I know podcasters might be listeners to audiobooks, so it's hard to find time to read these days. But would love to connect with people more on Instagram as well. My Instagram handle is at the.empathetic.counselor. And I just want to thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed our conversation and doing the 10-second transformation together, and hearing more about your journey as well.
Well, it's been my pleasure to have you here, and I hope that lots of folks check out the Mr. Roger Effect book and the practical application of it. I have one like kind of silly question to ask you though. When writing the book and preparing, like how many episodes of Mr. Rogers' show did you watch in preparation of writing the book? Like as an adult?
Yeah. Wow. Too many to count.
Okay.
It was watching and rewatching. But what was even more enlightening was some of the like articles and books that journalists had written about him. He was famous for befriending journalists. Whenever someone did an interview or an article with him, it's like they began a lifelong friendship. There's one gentleman who wrote the book I'm Proud of You, and he actually asked Mr. Rogers in sort of a father figure type of way to be proud of him. And Mr. Rogers started signing all his letters with "I'm proud of you." And they had this really meaningful friendship. So it was watching a lot of episodes, too many to count, but also reading about these stories with him and so many other people that were not really publicized.
You added a whole new dimension for me. So I'm sure you did it for the audience too, because I never thought that much about Mr. Rogers or that kind of impact. I remember watching it some, like I just feel like there's this whole illumination around it now that I have this great, fabulous perspective. So thank you for all the work you did and for being here to share your message about it.
Well, thank you for your appreciation of Mr. Rogers and the work. It really means a lot when you put they say, writing a book is like having a baby, and you put all this effort and work into it and give birth to this creation. And so it's really exciting to be able to share that. So I thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure.